Hi everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. Did you know that it costs me money to produce each episode of this podcast? I'd really appreciate your help to keep my show on the air and helping other people. Please join me over on Patreon, where you can also find commercial-free episodes, and the links are in the show notes. Thanks so much. Hi everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. My guest today is Yehudis Keller, who is a former member of an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York. Yehudis is currently a clinical psychology Ph.D. student in Cleveland, working under the mentorship of Dr. Julie Exline, an established researcher in religious and spiritual struggles. Previously, Yehudis graduated from Brooklyn College, CUNY, with a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in experimental psychology. That sounds very interesting. Her current goals are to contribute to psychological research on the mechanisms of psychological adjustment after disaffiliation from high-cost religion. Wow, that's something that our listeners can relate to. And to be a therapist specializing in that area. Welcome, Yehudis.
Thank you.
It's nice to finally get to meet you. We've been emailing back and forth for a little bit. Oh, wait a second. Steve is about to make an entrance here. Come on, Steve. Are you good? Come sit on my lap. So I would love to know a little bit about your childhood then. Growing up did you grow up in New York in the ultra-Orthodox section of the state?
Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn, in one of the, largely ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods, Crown Heights. It's where, for those who are familiar with the intricacies, one of the Hasidic sects is Chabad Lubavitch, and the origins for that, let's say the headquarters right now are in Crown Heights. So it's a large community. Growing up, most people in walking distance to me were either from the same community religiously or like Caribbean, African American. So that made it very easy for, I think, community leaders to like identify who is from the community and who is not. So that's where I am geographically from. It's very interesting to me, I think, being from Brooklyn, New York, because it's, there's so much access to so many kinds of worlds, but I feel like I really was successfully insulated for a long time, just right there.
Wow. Yes. So you're in that community. Were you in a large family?
My immediate family is made of my mom and my dad, and 4 siblings. I'm the second oldest of 5. So I think that's considered on the smaller average size for like that specific community. It's like a good average is like 7.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was school like? Were you attending a Jewish school that was right in the neighborhood? Were boys and girls segregated or?
Yeah. So when I think back on my education, although it was subpar and I feel like I did miss out on a lot of opportunities to like prepare for a future that I would have wanted to choose, I feel incredibly lucky to have grown up as a girl in the community educationally. Because I don't know if you're familiar, but with the schooling systems in Hasidic communities, it's quite common that girls will get like a dual education where half the day they're studying Judaic texts and stuff like that, and the other half of the day they'll focus on just like your regular secular studies that the state tests are based on. So I did get that, even though it was a little bit squished together and there weren't really like teacher qualifications and all sorts of other issues. But in my family, I'm one of 2 girls and I have 3 brothers. All 3 of my brothers started out at a big school in the neighborhood where they didn't learn anything secular at all. So if there was anything they were interested in, they kind of had to seek that out on their own. Being the second oldest, I have an older brother who was always precocious, I guess, academically. So like from a young age, he did kind of seek those things out, and he would go to the library and like kind of figure stuff out on his own. And he ended up getting his bachelor's in mathematics and philosophy from MIT, but like fully to his own credit, given just thinking about if I had gotten that education where I didn't learn the ABCs or how to add up one and one, I don't know if I would have made it through to higher education, because there would have been so much learning to catch up on, and so much of that motivation, that internal motivation. And I think not like just knowing that you want to seek it out, like you have to rely on that.
Yes. My friend and colleague Beatrice Weber, who also came out of the ultra-Orthodox community, she has really been championing this issue that boys in the ultra-Orthodox communities are not receiving adequate secular education. And that's, I think she's had brought a lawsuit against the state there. And she's also been a speaker at CORT, the Conference on Religious Trauma. And she's been I've interviewed her before on the Divorcing Religion podcast. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is something that really deserves attention. And you also are familiar with another guest that I've had on the podcast and speaking at CORT, named Pesach Eisen, who works in the field of psychology.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to know Pesach, and of course, to also know the work that Beatrice is doing. So big shout out to that, because I am avidly following all of those updates, and I feel really happy that there are like people who are putting their attention there. And yeah, I actually met Pesach through CORT because I attended through Footsteps, the organization for individuals who left Orthodox Judaism. So the first year they sponsored a bunch of members who were interested to go see it. And that was really great, because I was, of course, drawn to Pesach's talk due to his background in a similar community. And through that, he mentioned he's working on a study about why individuals who leave Orthodox Judaism do so at Brooklyn College. And I was like, I am doing my master's right now in psychology, in experimental psychology at Brooklyn College, and I was looking for a project that was like relevant to me, or I would have started something from scratch, but I didn't even know like who the appropriate faculty would be for that. So I reached out to him, and I ended up joining the study because they were that team was getting ready to start writing out of the data now that like analysis started and everything. And that was really perfect timing. So now we have, there's 3 publications out there, and one that's right at the cusp. It's just about to be published any day, on the reasons why people left Orthodox Judaism, all co-authored with Pesach Eisen. So
that is so cool. That is wonderful, because we absolutely need more academic research exploring religious trauma and what's going on. I'm so pleased that I could help facilitate that connection for you. And anyone who's listening, and you're hearing us say the word court, we don't mean a court of law. We're talking about CORT, the Conference on Religious Trauma. So I'm thrilled that Footsteps every year has sent kind of a delegation to this online conference, because the more people that we can help, the better. So that just makes me so, so happy. And now I'm curious then, you were raised in a home that believed and was observant. So how did you end up on this side of things?
Well, it's funny that I would have such a complicated answer when this is something that I've put attention towards studying. Like, why did you leave? I think for everybody, it does come down to like, there might be like primary triggers and reasons, but like it's just a whole journey, because I think it takes so much to pull away and like truly explore the other side, that even if somebody is, feeling, okay, like maybe I want to do this, I think it can take multiple reasons or things coming from multiple fronts to just like be like, okay, like I'm willing to risk what I have in order to just see and find out if what's what's on the other side. So for me, I'd say I always like was, your perfect little religious Jew. Um, I, I believed everything, and I liked having community. Um, I'd say there were some things kind of pulling at me, like psychologically, that like weren't great. I'd say, um, love my parents, but they kind of got together through the matchmaking system, and I always kind of wondered, like, oh, like, is this an ideal home? I
Mm.
me and my whole family, all my siblings have like some degree of neurodivergency. So it made growing up with three brothers really hard. Um,
Wow.
my sister is the youngest, so she came around later, but they were they were always like beating down my door. And I was like, I was kind of struggling a little bit in my family, like, and in my home, and just and also socially, I
Mhm.
wasn't so adept, and like, so there were some things that were always there, but I never had an issue with like Orthodox Judaism until coming into my own as an adolescent. I started internalizing a lot of things and figuring out, like, how am I going to build my personal connection with God? And additionally, some little bit of context in my community specifically, like the Chabad Lubavitch community that's originated in Crown Heights, but also satellites all over the place. Um, there's a history of 7 rabbis that were like formulated and carried this community on, right? That led everybody. Um, but the last one didn't have any children and didn't designate anybody to take over. And his whole messaging was about like how we are ready to bring the Messiah. So like there's nothing else to do. So when he died in the 90s, um, there has been no leader since. But since everyone in the community felt really connected to him, there was a lot of pressure to like not only build one's personal connection with God, but also with the rabbi as a very strong and necessary conduit to God, as in like go to his grave and pray and watch videos of him talking about Judaic ideas, and just like really think of him as like someone who's going to carry your prayers to God.
Wow.
A little
Wow.
bit of a Jesus kind of figure.
Yeah.
Um, which has
Interesting.
also been fascinating to learn about
Yeah.
Jesus differently from how I heard about him as the Jew who fell off the path. But anyway, this is all context for the fact that when I was in 8th grade, 13 years old, um, I had a cousin who passed away really suddenly from an accident, a scuba diving accident. It was just a freak accident, equipment malfunction. It was
Yeah.
6 weeks to his wedding. Of course, a
Heartbreaking.
total star, the oldest grandchild. Like, family has already been through a lot of pain. Like, there were so many things that really made me be like, this is horrible, right? And like
Yeah.
really take it hard, even though, I didn't have the closest connection with him, but like just really valued him existing and was just like,
Mhm.
oh my God, like nobody deserved this to happen, right?
Right.
So that was actually helpful for my religiosity, because I was like, this is something that is going to help me elevate his soul through saying psalms and having learning groups in his honor. And
Mhm.
that's kind of how I started. I even I
Mhm.
even wrote a poem during the morning period during the Shiva, when the rest of my family was out, taking care of that. Embarrassingly sent it to my aunt, his mother,
Oh.
where I was like, processing my feelings about this happening. And I even ended up with like a line about how at the end we defer to God because he's the one who has the knowledge and made this plan intentionally and everything. Horrible thing to send someone in warning, but I think they appreciate it at the time. However, shortly after, I think, a few weeks or a few months, but during the same time period, my uncle from the other side of the family had a freak accident and he fell down these metal stairs where he was working and nobody else was there. And they found him after a while and he was alive, but he was in a coma with major head trauma. So the fact that he was in a coma and my cousin from the other side had just died, it felt like things were coming in for all ends. And I like tripled down on everything religiously, so hard. And I was like, I have the power here to be bringing this man like back to his 3 young kids. And his youngest was like 10 months old and his wife was like, she wasn't working or anything. And I was like, gosh, I really have the power to build my connection with the rabbi, which I was coming into anyway, get to God. I would skip class to save Psalms. And like, it was just so, I think I was so like pure about it and like so intense about it. And
it felt empowering too. Yeah. Because you can't really do anything else.
Exactly. I felt like on this like high that I never felt. And then he died on a holiday, which, I think it was coming, but I didn't understand that, like being 13, that what hospice meant or whatever. So that really started my internal questioning of like, how could a good God do bad things? And I stayed religious, but I think I developed this like apathy towards, I don't think there's someone I don't have evidence that someone's listening.
Yeah.
Because like until then, anytime I went to the rabbi's grave, I would like write letters being like, I am bickering with my mother so much, please solve my relationships or things like that, But like then I just started to be like, okay, like, I don't know if they're listening. So like I stayed very outwardly religious, but like in the next year or so, I worked at summer camp and saved up some money and bought an iPod Touch. I think it was like 4th generation. And I started getting exposure to some things that were just like opening my world a little bit.
Were you allowed to, or was it secret?
No, I think iPods were very confusing for parents because they used to be the very loud like iPod Nanos out of the shuffles, like where you just have the music. So like, okay, you could just control what you download directly from a computer onto an iPod, and that's what I had before. I don't think it was fully understood that it really is like a window into the whole world. I think my mom did actually block like the official Google and YouTube and some of the other like basic apps that would get you out there, but I just found alternatives on the App Store. And then I think a few years later, I realized that the passcode was always 1, 2, 3, 4 for the parental controls, and I never tried it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I literally watched the movie Girl Interrupted. That was like one of the first movies I watched because I found it like for free on Crackle, and I watched that movie and there's a suicide in it. And that scarred me so much. And I was in class the very next day, or one of our Judea courses was on religious sensitivity through media. And there was just the teacher standing in front of the class being like, you have to watch what you consume because it affects your soul. And I was like, oh my God, I am off the deep end. And I'm just like picturing what went on in that film. But yeah, I still stayed externally religious until when I was about 18. I think literally on my 18th birthday, I like went on a date with a non-Jewish person, and a few weeks later, I went to Israel on Birthright, and I was, I signed myself up for a co-ed trip, even though I was supposed to sign up for a girls only trip, which would have been full of religious girls. I kind of knew what I was doing. Because once I went to the website to sign up, this was still while I was in high school, I saw that most of the options were actually just co-ed trips. And I was like, what if I just do it? Yeah.
And what's
So,
Birthright?
Birthright is a trip that's like sponsored by Israel and some affiliated organizations to bring Jewish individuals who are like, I think it's like between 18 and 24 to Israel if they haven't really had the opportunity to just show them around. It is based off the concept that everybody has a right to the place. No comment on that, but it's amazing it was amazing for me in the sense that it was like a free trip and my first opportunity to like do something myself that got me out of the bubble I'd always been in physically, because I'd been there mentally with like being online and on like some social media, like I had made online friends, and that one date. But yeah, the rest of it was really just, oh, okay, I could be friends with people. It doesn't just have to be someone who I went to school with, someone I went to camp with, someone who was a girl who grew up just like me.
Right. Yes. And so then you got to go away on this trip, which was a co-ed trip. So that was kind of new and exciting. And you're going to a different part of the world, which is also pretty exciting. And so how long were you gone, and what was it like when you came back?
Yeah, the original trip was 10 days. We met some friends there, and we extended our trip together for another 10 days to just hang around Israel. What happened there was that I came religiously. I actually made one intentional choice when I was packing, which was, even though I was like 100 degrees out there, but even though I brought like long t-shirts and knee-length skirts, I didn't bring socks to wear under my sandals. So that was something I knew going in. I was just like, I find this ridiculous. And I thought that already, but I didn't think I would become less religious. However, like, I have to say that the exposure did a lot of like confirmation for me, where like, I was like, oh, I'm not judging these people like I thought I would. And then like one night we had like gone out and I had a dress with a cardigan to cover my shoulders. And a friend from the group was just like, take off the cardigan. And I succumbed to that. And I just had like a million small moments where I was doing something that wasn't according to Orthodox practice. And I realized, that if there was punishment, it was not immediate and I wasn't feeling heavy guilt. So
you
that helped me
rebel.
along there. Yes. When I came back, I was set to go off to seminary, like a year away with, there was like 17 girls originally to learn Judaic stuff and, live in a dorm together and all of that stuff. So I did kind of reel it in mostly. However, a lot of the girls there were also exploring things. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Wow. So then you did that. That was a year. And were your parents aware? Did your siblings, could anybody tell that things were changing for you?
Well, I think my mom was always concerned that I would be susceptible to like peer pressure and stuff. There was something that happened back in high school to kind of like, I think, start this concern. Because when I was in 10th grade and I had this iPod Touch already for like a year or so, and I was really into fine arts, like drawing and painting. Oh my gosh. I look back and I'm like, oh, I was so innocent. I don't know how anyone could have thought anything. Like, yes, I was scarring myself with stuff, but I wasn't doing anything like I wasn't going out with boys. I wasn't dressing immodestly. I wasn't eating non-kosher. I was keeping Shabbat. Like I was such a good girl, but I did have this iPod, and I got introduced to Instagram, where I decided to make an account, and I just posted my art. I was like, oh, did this drawing today. And somehow that picked up a lot of traction. This was like 2012 when Instagram was new. So it's really like, I think more accessible to just like become popular based on stuff you drew or whatever.
Sure.
So at some point, like anyone in my high school who had Instagram was pretty much following me. And this got around to some of the admin who thought that because I was sharing stuff on Instagram, and even though I wasn't posting myself or posting anything that was like explicitly not okay, I was like doing drawings of like celebrities. So this would be like males forbidden, females who weren't dressed according to like modesty also forbidden, showing kind of that like, I don't know, I was doing stuff based on like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, super nerdy. But yeah, like all of it was not a good look, and I was considered to be a bad influence. So I actually got asked to leave that school, and that was a big school in the community. So I transferred to a smaller school. I went from a 500 girl school to a 25 girl school for the last 2 years of high school. But according to, I think where my mother was concerned there, and my new principal, was that the new school tended to be for girls who were asked to leave the bigger school, but they were usually asked to leave because, you know, they weren't dressing modestly or they were hanging out with boys or things like that. But there was nothing like that going on with me. So when I transferred to that school, the principal like made me promise that I wouldn't ask about, that I wouldn't like ask questions about the existence of God just because I see other girls doing it. And I said, of course, I'm very firm in my faith and whatever. But I think that even though I didn't show it at that point, I did have more exposure over that time. And the friends I made there were killer, and, you know, maybe also some of them were exploring things a little bit, or the general standard of religiosity wasn't up to what it was in my previous school. So I think my mom was always a little concerned.
Yeah. And as a mother, I can relate. But isn't that like such a snapshot of fundamentalism? You know, the idea that we have answers that can't be questioned. So you better keep your questions to yourself. Don't you dare take the lid off and start searching. There's such fear wrapped up in fundamentalism. So that's a really interesting story. I love the Instagram piece and the creative arts, fine arts piece. That's so cool. And then fast forward us a little bit. What was it like for you to leave? Did you ever have a conversation with your mother or with your parents to say, you know what, this isn't for me anymore?
Yeah. My older brother set me up for success a little bit, to his own, I think, pain, because we call it going off the path, off the derech. I mean, the community calls it that, and we've embraced it. So I'll say that. But so he kind of went down that route a little bit earlier. He was having trouble with the equivalent to high school that boys in my community do at that age, where they're usually sent away at 14 to like pretty much boarding schools where like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. is just Torah study all day. So it's just a very intense version of what they were doing before, and in a new like kind of social environment. So he was having some struggles there. So for the year that he was 18, he ended up in Israel, apparently at a school for kids who are struggling with the yeshiva, the Jewish studies, I guess, system for boys. So apparently that was a more relaxed school and he started exploring stuff, but I didn't see him for like 9 months or so. And when he came back, he pretty much just he had long hair. He just declared, "I'm not religious. I say the F-bomb now. I just don't care. I smoke cigarettes, like whatever." So he kind of came out there ablaze. Yeah. I cried and was in shock. Like, I couldn't handle this, let alone my parents, who were like, I saw like text messages on my mother's phone, which I probably shouldn't have looked, but she was seeking advice on like what to do. Like, what do I do about my boy? Like, I was able to fly under the radar a little bit, because when I came into my exploration of no longer being religious, I think it came out so much more gradually. Like I said, like I stopped wearing socks in the summer, which, by the way, is hard to tell, because until then we would wear thin stockings, pantyhose, that looked exactly the same, to the point where ever since I was allowed to start wearing them at 12 years old, my dad would ask me, like every time I was wearing them, like, "Are you wearing tights?" Because he couldn't tell. So anyway, I'm just saying that, like, I did go through the process in a visibly more gradual way. So I think that over time, my parents had to become accepting, and my family in general just had to become accepting of my brother's transformation, which came as such a shock, that when I was saying things like, "I don't know, I'm not going to keep your standard of dairy kosher certification, but I'll keep this other standard that's a little bit lesser," I think it was like, okay, it's fine. Like, I could handle this little blow and this little blow. I think that I would have completely devastated them if my partner were not Jewish, but yeah, I never got to figure that out because I do have a Jewish partner. So
okay, all right. So now, so you're now in school. You've been in university a number of years, working on psychological studies and so forth. So, what's it like with your parents now? Do you think they accept that you're not as Jewish as they would like you to be? I'm not sure how to say it. Where would you put yourself on the spectrum right now? Because I know also we have a difference between very religious people, and then the cultural aspect also, and that can be so hard to split apart. I don't know.
Yeah, my immediate family and select extended relatives have been, I think, so good about it, especially with all the time that's transpired between, I think, me like finishing to cross the bridge to the other end and realizing that I'm not planning on ever returning again. Because there was a while of like, doing what I want now, but maybe I want a religious family, or, like there was enough time for like that acceptance to grow. Like, I say that at this point with my immediate family, I do what I want. Like, I'll say, "Hey, I'll join you for the holidays, but like, we're going to bring a car and we might go on an afternoon excursion," even though nobody else would do that. Or I'll make sure that I'm dressing respectfully, but, maybe with general modest standards and not necessarily the Judaic Orthodox understanding of that. So like that has like the past couple of years, that has been so great, because I think that they've kind of come around to like, if she gets to do it on her terms, then we all get to just not think about this as a barrier right now. Like, of course, we're following the structure of like, everything's kosher, and if we're doing Shabbat, we're doing Shabbat. But like, I think that they've come to a point where they're like, why did we have kids in the first place? To love them. I think that is the struggle that I think I see so many families going through, and it's also prevalent in just like the literature, where there's this kind of huge drop in relationship right when things start going different ways, right? And I think especially if somebody just came out and said, "Hey, I'm an atheist," or "Hey, I'm not religious anymore. I'm not going to church."
Like your brother did.
Like my brother did. There's like that huge drop. And parents do have to recalibrate because I don't think that all people who bring children into a religious home ever had the chance to really think about what am I doing and why. And they have to like figure out, oh, wait, I love my kid just because they're my kid. And I can let go of the hopes that they will be this perfect religious child with all of the values that I've instilled in them. I think they come to a point where like, oh, my child still has good values and a moral compass and is still a pleasant person to be around and still has a lot to contribute to the world. At this point, my family is even like proud of me for like what I've done and like what I'm doing academically and clinically. And I think that's amazing. It's a little bit ironic because I received what I'd call like an anti-education a little bit, because even though I did get like my high school diploma, college was at the point that I was in high school and thinking about what are my next steps. Like college was a big enemy of like what one is to do. So I think the fact that there is pride now is like, yes, first of all, ironic, but also I think marks a lot of growth with like, we didn't prepare her for this and we didn't even think it was right or true to her path or whatever, but like now we can actually not only accept that that's what she's doing, but also see the value that like she's bringing to the world through doing that. So
I'm so happy for you. Yes,
yeah.
That's because that is not always the case when we are looking at people who grew up in such insular environments and insular religious groups. Often, once they become disaffiliated, that's it. It can cost people pretty much everything if they're shunned, which does happen fairly frequently from insular religious groups, but that has not been the case for you. You've been able to maintain loving family ties. So I'm just so pleased for you. And please tell us now a little bit about the research that you're doing. So you mentioned Pesach earlier and some of what he was working on. What are you working on, or what's been interesting or surprising for you that you've learned?
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned the exploration of doubt and how it seems so harmful that many fundamentalist communities like are so afraid of like that kind of coming up and becoming something that's talked about. I did just work on a chapter on religious doubt that for a book, but one of the, and we'll see if it gets published, but that's besides the point. I think cool. the sentiment that's pulled together there is just kind of introducing that question of like is it actually more harmful for those who end up remaining religious to go through this like avoidance of doubt as well? Because I wonder, based on what we see about like psychological correlates of doubt and the ways which it could be like really instrumental to like personality building, finding faith, and just finding where somebody wants to be, is that you kind of have to go through it to get there. You have to question in order to know where you want to be. So like I was used to like, oh, questions are allowed in Judaism, but that was a very specific kind of question that was allowed. It was like within the framework of never questioning whether God exists, you can ask, was Moses 40 or 80 when he led the Jews out of Egypt, right. You know? So
pretty specific.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that because people can grow so much within their spirituality when they go through like the religious doubt process properly, it would be worth the cost of allowing that into fundamental. I mean, of course, ideally speaking, it would be worth the cost to bring that into fundamentalist spaces so that those who will grow within their faith will have the opportunity to do so in a way that's supported by their very community. And those who will be happier elsewhere can perhaps be told it's okay to let go. It's okay to lose some members in order to really strengthen the community that one has, in a way. That's just something. So that's just something I'm wondering about.
Yeah. Yes. Being able to question and to doubt. I mean, that's part of being human. And in my experience, fundamentalism squashes curiosity. It has to be replaced with obedience. And so then there's not really room for curiosity. It's a very limited scope, as you say, like the specific questions that you can ask. And then people get branded as troublemakers when they do ask questions, and then they're dangerous. Like other people can catch their curiosity or their apostasy once they
or catch their
out.
Instagram posts.
That's right. So what about that when people leave? So what's that? You were connected with Footsteps, or maybe even still are connected with Footsteps. How did that come about?
Oh, I was actually very reluctant to label myself as somebody who was no longer religious. For a while, I had totally forgotten about that. But then I found evidence in a conversation with a friend a couple years ago where when I was a freshman in college, first of all, I was struggling and drowning as I did go to a city level college, which is qualified to teach, but some of the courses can be rather accessible for those who are prepared on any level. The way that I'd learned and studied before had no comparison to what I was expected to do. So I almost failed out my first semester. But not only that, but I was completely financially and emotionally on my own when I started right after seminary. I kind of thought that going to seminary would allow me to continue being supported by my family after I kind of came back when my family did move away at the time that I ended high school. So, and I wanted to be back in New York anyway, because that's where the rest of my network was. And it's what I knew. And I didn't have any of the resources to even think about really doing something properly on my own. But I did, with the help of a friend, apply to all the city universities of New York, and I got into Brooklyn College. And yeah, I was struggling there financially, academically, and I did know about Footsteps, and I didn't like Footsteps because I thought, well, the propaganda got to me from the community. We always, as the community, so me as a member of the community in this flashback here, thought that Footsteps is some gnarly little Satan with big fingers coming in to pluck out the good religious children and bring them to this dark other side and turn them into liberals.
Oh my gosh.
Very
not
scary
liberals.
Stuff. Yes, liberals.
And what is Footsteps, actually, for people who maybe have not heard of the organization?
Yeah. Footsteps is a wonderful organization, which with a very appropriate name, that was created to help people who are struggling as they leave the Orthodox Jewish community. They can help the most for people who are in the tri-state area, given their location. But they have so many resources for financial, academic, just social support kind of stuff. And they also have more specific things like LGBTQ groups. They have social workers. They have support groups and lawyer resources for those going through custody battles with the still religious ex. Very, very great and specific stuff. So I realized that I needed the financial help at least, because I couldn't even pay the like tuition for college with like my job. So I'd heard about Footsteps, and I heard that if you sign up and say, I went to yeshiva and I don't like it, and now I'm trying to go to college and I don't have the resources, that they'll help you out with a little bit of a scholarship. So I did exactly that. I didn't believe in what I was like doing. I was like basically giving money to the devil. But I over this time, I was becoming less religious, but I still didn't believe that I was not religious. And I still didn't believe that there could be an organization that's just waiting for the people who are already leaving to help them out, not going in and plucking people out.
Exactly.
Very different.
Exactly.
But yeah, over time, I became a more active member, and I'm still enjoying their scholarship, which I am extremely, extremely grateful for. It's helped so much. Little things like, paying for us to go to court, or like I've found other individuals who are completing their degrees in related fields. Has been a great network as well.
Yeah.
I warmed up to Footsteps over time, of course, and definitely changed my perspective. But I think it's funny thinking about like the way I got involved, and like how I was kind of like suspicious. I think it's just a sign of like propaganda working.
Right. Yeah. And it takes an incredible amount of courage anyway, even for us to start the doubting process, or allow the doubts about what we've been indoctrinated with, to enter our mind and to entertain them and start thinking about them and wondering, well, is this all there is? Is this the right way? Who says? There are, many other thousands of other religions out there, and they all say they're the right way. So it takes courage for us to even begin the doubting process. And then this was just one more thing where you had to kind of overcome anxiety because of the propaganda that you'd heard. And it took courage to reach out to them. That wasn't an easy thing to do. And it's brought you to a beautiful place. I'm so glad Footsteps exists and that they're there to help people like you. And I wonder if you can tell us at all kind of the nature of your research, either things you've been looking at or things you're looking into, recent developments in the field related to understanding religious disaffiliation or religious trauma or anything like that.
Yeah. So there's definitely been like a big uptick in interest research-wise in the field of religious disaffiliation over the past while. And there's been a lot of important, I think, groundwork for just like understanding like who these people are and what they go through, bringing just a lot of visibility to like this as an important thing to pay attention to, because so many people are continuously going through it. So like, yes, some of the important groundwork there is just in like the mental health correlates of the process of leaving. And where I find my interest within that is like, I can see that it is psychologically challenging for many individuals who pull away from what I call high cost or fundamentalist religions. And over time, people tend to heal and find new communities. And I am very curious about like what's happening during that time. Okay, so you left, you're not doing great. Fast forward a couple of years and you're pretty well adjusted. What went on there? What kinds of things did you overcome and go through? So right now I'm just about to start data collection for my master's thesis, which is looking at how forgiveness can fill that gap to some degree. So I want to know, for the individuals who pulled away from and I'm using ultra-Orthodox Judaism here as like a bit of a pilot sample, because I do have great access and good background on all of that. But I think it will be something that can be expanded to just high cost religion in general. But I'm looking at how for those who pull away from ultra-Orthodox Judaism that experienced something like negative, just like had like an event or something like that occur that wasn't great. So I first want to see like, are they upset at anybody? Like, is there negative feelings towards anyone that kind of accompanies that? And are those things that have resolved over time? And if so, was the process of forgiveness something that helped that?
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so then what comes to mind for me is the need to define forgiveness, because I feel it's a concept that has largely been hijacked by religion and has huge religious connotations. And it's also something that can be weaponized by abusers and by predators. So they demand it. They demand the secrecy, but also they demand the forgiveness. And they say they're sorry, and then they turn around and continue with the harm. And people can feel trapped in that. And then sometimes we can even feel like there's something wrong with us. We get into victim blaming. Why can't I forgive that person? So it's the F word for me when I'm working with a lot of my clients. And what I focus on instead is getting to the point of acceptance. So we have to be able to accept the reality of what has transpired. Either, we were harmed by an idea or by persons who believe that idea, whatever it is. And then we get to decide from there, okay, I'm at the point of accepting, yes, this did happen to me. This was done to me. And now what am I going to do moving forward? Am I going to keep that person in my life? It's my choice to do that or not. And there doesn't have to be anger associated with it. It's really a matter of empowering the individual to decide how they want to proceed going forward. So I think that'll be some interesting research that you're doing there.
And I agree with you that forgiveness in this context does deserve a very well thought out explanation. Something that I dislike for this context, and I'm curious what you think about it, is reconciliation being like a necessary part. I think that there is an established possibility to experience forgiveness without feeling like one has to involve themselves with the idea or the person or the community or whatever that has brought them these negative feelings to begin with.
Yeah, and indeed, in some cases, it wouldn't even be healthy to have continued contact with people whom one finds to be toxic. If someone is all the time judging us, criticizing our choices, especially when it comes to belief systems and the way that we are choosing to live our life, it might not be healthy for us to maintain close ties to that person. And so then we also sometimes have to come face to face with the idea of what is family. And just because I was born into this group, or some people adopted into a family situation, does that mean that I am obligated to maintain close ties or any ties with these people after I reach the age of majority? I mean, really, our parents' job is to raise us safely, hopefully, to adulthood, and then they are in our lives by invitation only. And we can rescind that invitation at any time if we feel that it's necessary. And in fundamentalist homes, boundaries are almost non-existent. So learning about boundaries is also super important as we're building our healthy lives moving forward. And we're allowed to have boundaries with our parents. So if we want to stay in touch with our parents and our siblings, and we feel like that's a healthy thing for us to do, we can do it while also exercising some boundaries there.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. That's really like a case by case basis thing. I find it important to like consider that if that is something that someone wants to invite into their life. But I also think that it's separate from the process of kind of where someone focuses their energy in relation to what occurred. So it's more about like, am I just reducing the amount of time that I'm spending feeling angry and giving energy to this? Am I stopping to do things that make me like specifically avoid thinking about it? Am I working towards some kind of like decision to move forward in whichever way? One thing I'm curious about, and not necessarily looking at here, but because I think it's going to be really hard to quantify. But one thing that's super interesting is like how one's views of forgiveness while they were religious translate into like their forgiveness behaviors, and kind of like get a bit of an equation there of what kind of views one develops about forgiveness, based specifically on how that they processed it back then.
Yeah. That is very interesting. And I feel like it's all part of the process, part of the journey as we, in my case, I say divorce religion, but as people are kind of making a transition from the sacred to secular world, one thing that I think can be really helpful is doing values clarification exercises and values clarification work, because it can help us kind of see the difference between what was enforced on me, like what was I told had to be important to me, versus now here I am, an adult person living my own life. What's actually important to me now? And it's not a process in judgment or an exercise in judgment. It's just, again, facing reality, accepting reality. Here's where I am today. And so before, at the top of my list, when I was very religious, obedience would have been highly prized for me. It doesn't even make my list now. Autonomy is at the top of my list. So there's been quite a shift there. And also, having an attitude of forgiveness would have been very important to me back then. Not so much now. So accepting reality, always doing my best to see reality as it is, not just how I'd like it to be. And there can be a flexibility, rolling with things. Sometimes someone's having an off day. They might say something or do something, and it's, it kind of has a barb in it. But rather than feeling so wounded or feeling like I have to attack them, I might just decide, oh, you know what? I think maybe they're having a bad day. If it's a repeated pattern, then it is something that needs to be addressed. So I think it's all part of our growth and maturation as we leave fundamentalist religion and mature into the rest of our life.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's actually there's a little bit of research showing that although people who are higher on religiosity do endorse higher forgiving attitudes, it doesn't translate into like being significantly more forgiving when specific events transpire in relation to those who are less religious. So I think that kind of speaks to your point of like, yes, this is maybe that was like a value on my list, but how would something like that have translated beyond just thinking it's something I have to do? Does it actually make you process things in the same way that your values
Mhm.
dictate that you should.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think studies examining generosity and altruism also are very interesting in this similar kind of vein when we're looking at people who are or were, they score high on religiosity versus people who have left those communities or have been secular all their lives. I think that those things would be just so interesting to learn about. Thanks for coming on my show today and talking about some of these things and sharing your experience. It's been a real joy meeting you today. Thanks, Yehudis.
Likewise. Thank you.
And thank you for listening or watching today. I'll just remind you that I am a registered professional counselor, a religious recovery consultant. My website is divorcing-religion.com, and I'd love to have a free consultation with you if you're interested. Thanks again, and take care.